Why are Bugattis so expensive? The range kicks off with a normal Chiron, and that is over £2 million. It's actually to do with all the crazy engineering that is required to build a 1500 horsepower hypercar. Now in this video I'm going to show you all the coolest features on the latest Bugattis and explain to you why they cost so much. I'm Matt Watson and you're watching Carwow. Buy, sell,
Carwow.
Let's start this video by talking about the Bugatti's famous W16 engine. So, as the name suggests, it has 16 cylinders, which is 4 times more cylinders than most cars, because most cars are 4-cylinder, right? You can do the maths. Then, there's the valves in each cylinder. It has 4 valves per cylinder, which means 64 valves in total. Then there's the injectors. It has 2 injectors per cylinder, which is 32 injectors. Then there's the 4 turbos. It's a quad turbo car. That all adds up. Now, how much does it come to? Well, with most manufacturers, you can buy a replacement engine if the engine goes pop, and you'll be able to find a price for a replacement engine. For most cars, you can't really do that with a Bugatti. It's hard to get pricing information out of them. There's nothing really on the internet. All I've managed to find is some random website that suggests that the turbos are about £6,000 each. But I can't verify that. It's really funny, it's sort of mysterious. Maybe it's a case of, if you have to ask the question, you're too poor to afford the car. Anyway, back to the turbochargers. In terms of boost pressure, nothing particularly special. 18 PSI, it's good, but it's not loads. For instance, the Hennessy Venom, its turbochargers produce 23 PSI of boost. Thing is though, the Bugattis are huge turbochargers that work together to shift about 1,000 litres of air per second. So that's twice the volume of the boot on a BMW M5. In fact, in half an hour, the 4 turbos on the Chiron's engine could inflate a whole hot air balloon. They shift that much air. It's not only the flow rate from the turbos which is impressive, so too is that of the water pump. So it can shift 13 litres per second of water. Now, by comparison, your cold tap at home, if you're filling a litre bottle of water, that'll take about 10 seconds. It's nuts. The reason why the Chiron's water pump is so powerful is because it's got to do quite a lot of cooling. As a result, the car has quite a few radiators. 10 to be precise. That's more than I have in my house. Obviously, when you've got such a high performance engine, you need to check that it's running okay. And that's why Bugatti bench tests every engine that goes into every car they sell for 8 hours before it's delivered to a customer. Now, other manufacturers don't do this. They'll randomly spot check engines on the production line. Not so Bugatti. The engineers will go through and check 3,800 different components to make sure they're all working properly. They don't just test the engine though, they also test the entire car. So before being delivered to a customer, a car will actually be test driven by Bugatti's engineers for 200 miles. But they don't just then give it to the customer, they replace the entire floor and the wheels, so there's no marks. That pre-delivery test drive is nothing though when you compare what Bugatti actually do to its pre-production models. Take the Cento Dieci, for example. The pre-production version of that car was driven for almost 19,000 miles while testing and at high speeds, plus in 45-degree heat in the Arizona desert. And Bugatti were only ever going to build 10 of them. And then there's the high-speed testing. Obviously, Bugatti need to make sure that their car can cope at sustained high speeds, which the owners will actually never do. Anyhow, they do most of their testing for high speed at VW's test centre in Germany. It's got 2 long straights, but they're joined by corners, and the Germans have speed limits on the corners, and no one can disobey the rules, not even Bugatti. So Bugatti needs to be able to do sustained high speeds in a loop. So for that, they head to good old Italy, where going fast is definitely allowed. So they go to the Nardo ring down in southern Italy, and they will test the cars for up to 20,000 miles, doing speeds at times of up to 300 kilometers an hour. It's nuts. They do that to see just how well the engine and the gearbox cope with sustained high speeds and the temperatures that that brings. Actually, I went with Bugatti to Nardo to do some high-speed testing in their record-breaking SS 300 Plus. Now, if you want to see how quick we went in the car, click on the pop-out banner up there for the link in the description below to watch that video. It was scary. Now, Bugattis aren't just about speed, they also do a lot of work on aerodynamics, because when you're going at high speed, you can't get aero wrong, otherwise things could turn out quite messy. The main way car manufacturers hone their vehicles' aerodynamics is in a wind tunnel. Obviously, Bugatti used to be owned by Volkswagen, and you think, surely they just do all their aero in VW Group's wind tunnel in Germany. No, Bugatti can't though. You see, the wind tunnel that VW has can only produce airflow at up to 250 kilometers an hour. As I've already explained, Bugatti does lots of testing at 300 kilometers an hour, so they need a wind tunnel that can do that. And they had to use a different one as a result. In fact, the wind tunnel that Bugatti uses has a fan that is powered by a motor with almost 10,000 horsepower. That's effectively the same horsepower produced by 5 Merlin engines from the later generations of Supermarine Spitfire. What's that, you want to see me review a Supermarine Spitfire? Click on the pop-out banner up there or follow the link in the description below. Bugatti spent 300 hours in the wind tunnel developing the aero for the normal Chiron, but then they had to go back again to redevelop the aero specifically for the SS300 Plus. See, that car needed 8% more airflow for improved cooling because its engine produced more performance. But at the same time, it also needed less drag in order to be able to hit that 300 mile an hour threshold. Bugatti took a number of measures to reduce drag on the car, so they actually made it 25 centimeters longer. When you make an object longer, it means that the actual curvature of the parts becomes less, it gets more smoothed out, and that reduces drag. Also on the Chiron, they just changed the shape of the roof slightly for the same reason. Then at the back, they fitted a new diffuser. And what that did was enable the car to have sufficient downforce so that it was stable at high speed without having to deploy its rear wing, which would obviously slow the car down. My favourite change to the aero on the SS300 Plus are the vents over the front wheels, which release air pressure out of the wheel arches, and apparently, according to Bugatti, improve downforce by up to 30 kilos. And that brings us on to the insane tyres fitted to the Chiron. So they're made by Michelin and they're specially developed Pilot Sport Cup 2s. However, because of the insane speeds that the SS300 Plus can do, Michelin couldn't use their normal tyre testing machine. So instead, for the Bugatti tyres, they use their machine for testing airplane tyres, which can spin at up to 500 kilometers an hour. It was even used to develop the tyres for the space shuttle. And that brings us onto the matter of G-force. You see, when the Bugatti is running at its top speed, the tyres are spinning at such a rate that the components on the tyre are experiencing 4,000 Gs, which is nuts. That means that the valve assembly in the tyre with the dust cap, which normally weighs about the same as a mouse, increases in weight to about the same as a Great Dane dog. That's 50 kilos. And to make sure that every tyre that's fitted to every Chiron can cope with those forces without any incident or injury, they are all x-rayed and examined. After all, it's the tyres that keep the Chiron attached to the road, and they're rather important when it comes to braking from the car's mental top speeds. And that brings me on to the brakes themselves. So you've got carbon ceramic brakes, 420mm discs at front and 400 at the rear. You've got 8 piston calipers at the front, 6 piston at the rear, and the calipers themselves, they're not cast in a mould, they're actually forged from solid ingots of aluminium so that they're nice and strong and reliable. But actually, this is not the best solution for brakes, and Bugatti is actually developing some 3D printed brake calipers. And they're 3D printed using thousands of layers of titanium, and they're constructed in a biometric structure, which is a little bit like Alien, where you have the strength in the structure where you need it, and there's no material at all where you don't. As a result, not only is it stronger than the current system, it's also a lot lighter. Bugatti is currently testing these new 3D printed brakes. They haven't gone on a production car yet, but they have used 3D printed parts on other production cars. For instance, the Supersport 300 Plus and the Pure Sport have 3D printed rear parts to their exhaust systems. Meanwhile, on the track-only Bolide, which will be made in very limited numbers, they've used titanium 3D printed push rods for the suspension system. Now, these parts just weigh 100 grams, but they can cope with 3.5 tons of force. Now, to put that weight-strength ratio into perspective, it's a little bit like me being able to bench press 1,225 chirons. Now, while Bugatti might be interested in weight saving in some areas, they're less so in others, especially in the interest of bling. You see, the badge on the front of the Bugatti Chiron is made out of silver, and silver isn't the lightest material to build the badge out of. I suppose that doesn't matter anyway, really, because Bugatti allows customers to personalise the cars exactly as they want them, even if it means adding a bit of weight. But to make sure that customers don't make any really bad decisions, they employ a specific designer to help the customer through the process. Now, this isn't just some guy who just comes along with some swatches and a felt tip pen. This is a proper car designer. He used to design cars. He knows what he's doing, and he works with the customer to get sort of what they want, but also what won't disrespect the Bugatti brand. One customer was allowed to have various parts of the car covered in gold. This is what they did.
Gold finger.
I love gold. Now, Bugatti didn't just have to stick those bits of gold on, they also had to polish them, and it took 10 hours for each part. Then there was this customer that wanted to do a unique paint scheme for their Bugatti Divo. And this is what they created. And I must say, I think this is pretty awesome. Wasn't easy though. It took 3 weeks for Bugatti to do the colour on the car, and then an extra 2 weeks on top of that to do the pattern. However, Bugatti didn't just do it on their car. They actually practiced first on a spare Divo they just happened to have lying around. But I guess that's the thing with Bugatti, super exclusivity. Now, to put their exclusivity into context, Ferrari will only build 599 SP3 Daytonas, maybe about £2 million each. Bugatti is only going to build 500 Chirons in total, including all special editions. To be fair, Bugatti does actually make some cars based on the Chiron, which it doesn't class as Chirons. For instance, the Divo. Now, there'll be 40 of those made in total, and they each cost £4 million. Then there's the Bolide. Once again, they'll make 40 of those. They haven't released the price on that car. Probably be about the same. Then there's the Cento Dieci, of which there'll only be 10. They'll cost £7 million. But the most exclusive Bugatti of all is La Voiture Noire. There will only be one of those. Now, it was actually revealed a while ago. If you want to find out more about it, click the link up there, follow the link in the description below for my video. Now, Bugatti hasn't revealed who that customer is, and they never will. But before you ask, no, it's not me. Sadly, YouTube doesn't pay quite that well. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like. Let me know what you think is the best brand, Ferrari or Bugatti. Let me know in the comments below. Click on those windows there for some more videos. And if you click on that box there, you can go to Carwow to sell your car and find out how much it really is worth.